Hello. It's been a while. That thing we fondly call real life has been intruding somewhat recently. I've been doing an awful lot of painting work. And on the side of my tarot studies, to be honest, I've not been doing an awful lot. What I thought I would actually do today is to just have a little stroll through my one and only Oracle deck of cards. Oracle decks aren't really my thing at all. I'm quite I've got quite a narrow field of study, and that narrow field of study is tarot. It doesn't really veer much to either side of that, and Oracle decks haven't really appeared on my radar. But I picked this one up very cheaply a few months ago, just because I thought I might like to look at the illustrations and to see how an Oracle deck works, and I was very pleased with it. It is the Druid Plant Oracle. This fits into a suite of tarots and oracles. We all have Druid in the title. There's the Druidcraft Tarot, and there's also the Druid Animal Oracle. The concept and the book that goes with this are by Philip and Stephanie Carr-Gomm, who of course are very involved, well, very, very involved with the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, which is quite a big thing. And it's illustrated as the other decks in this series are illustrated by Will Worthington. I'm one of those people. I'm not a big fan of the look of the Druidcraft Tarot, which I know is very popular, but it's just not me somehow. But this is very different, and I'm very pleased I got it. And I think it will be a permanent addition to my collection because it's just so lovely. Quick walkthrough. It's quite popular. There are other walkthroughs online. I think if this video of mine does anything unique with this, it'll be me just saying a little bit about how I use this, which I think is probably slightly different from how it's intended and how a lot of other people do use it. It's beautifully presented. It's in this fairly sturdy cardboard box, and with a little tape on the side that you pull out like a drawer. And inside there is the book, which is a 144 page paperback. An awful lot in there, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then there's the deck of cards, 36 of them. There are also, which I don't have here at the moment, there's also a sheet for doing spreads, and I think 2 blank cards are provided with the deck for you to do your own illustrations of any sort of plant life that has a special meaning for you, which is a rather lovely idea. To go back to the book for a second, I'll just put the cards to one side. To go back to the book for a second, it is very well done indeed. Each of these 36 cards has a very thorough write-up. Here's Bethany. It's got different names for it. It's got some basic keywords that go with the plant. It gives you a little bit of plant lore about it, and then gives you more detailed meanings and a bit more plant lore in a different kind of way there. And how there's particularly continued references throughout the book to how the plant might relate to the practice of Druidcraft, as Philip Carr-Gomm teaches. And it goes through the whole thing, and it's a really nicely done book. Very nicely done. Worth a read just by itself for anybody who's interested in plant lore. All of the plants, I think all of the plants illustrated can be found in the British Isles. And so that kind of brings me on to how I use these cards. because all the plants are native to the country I live in, to the country I was born and brought up in. I know a lot of them, and I think most people who have ever spent any time in the British countryside would recognise and know quite a few of these plants. And the way I use this deck is really not for divination as such, not even really for meditation, but the sheer pleasure of looking at these illustrations really does an awful lot for raising my mood. It's a great pleasure just to look, and also to let the plant sort of resonate with my own memories, my own associations of knowing that plant from living in the countryside when I was a child, living in a small village later, even living in a town as I do now. Some of these plants are within 3 minutes walk of where I'm sitting talking to us right now. And so that's what I do. I really just look and I recollect, I think, and I let the associations happen in my mind. I'm not trying to get a lesson from them particularly. I'm not trying to predict anything particularly either. If I do want to do that, I use the book because it's all in there. And, pick a card or 2 or 3 cards and look it up in the book and meditate on the meanings that the Carr-Gomms associate with them. A word on the quality of the illustrations. It is absolutely superb. Will Worthington is a really good illustrator. The only reason I don't like the Druid Craft tarot is because I'm not particularly fond of those very realistic illustrations in connection with the tarot. Here, where he's illustrating British plant life, he is superb. These illustrations are absolutely among the top quality of what's a very British tradition of botanical illustration that goes back 200-300 years, and the quality is just magnificent, as you'll see when we flick through a bit more. And it is just such a pleasure to look at these pictures in that way that I described, and to just let the associations sort of filter through your mind. I'll go through a few of the associations first and then do a bit more general chat about the other pictures. At the top of that, I mean, I've put the ones I'm going to do associations about right at the top. And at the very top, one of the plants that is most evocative for me is wild garlic. And I remember being, when I was a child, a very small child, one of my earliest memories is the path from our house through the neighbouring woodland to the river that was nearby. There was masses and masses of wild garlic in spring, and the scent of it, which isn't like, it's not like cooking garlic at all, it's a very different smell, it's a very different scent, a beautiful scent, and the gorgeous little heads of white flowers that would come out in the spring are one of my earliest and fondest childhood memories. And even now, if I smell wild garlic when I'm out for a walk, it brings it all back, and it's wonderful, it's lovely. And there it is in his illustration there, it's gorgeous. Another great childhood association was fern. And again, like I said, when I was a child, we lived near some woodland, and the woodland led to a river, and of course down by the riverbank where it was nice and damp, the ferns would grow, and they grow very high. And I remember when I was a small child, the ferns were nearly as tall as I was. So that's another one that comes back really quite forcefully when I remember the ferns back then, and what they looked like and what they felt like as you walked through them and brushed past them. And yeah, brambles, yes, from when I was a slightly older child, and walking out and about on the farm, and there would be brambles growing in the hedgerows, and it was very tempting in late summer to pick the brambles and eat them. But of course, being a farm lad, It's drummed into you from almost the time you can walk. You must not pick the brambles off the hedgerows and eat them unless you are absolutely sure that they haven't been sprayed with pesticide or anything. Otherwise you will end up very ill indeed, if not actually dead. Fortunately, by the time I got to a certain age, we knew which of the hedgerows had been sprayed and which hadn't. And so occasionally you would pick a handful of brambles and just gulp them down as you were out for a walk, and that was lovely. Yeah, but not recommended. Absolutely not recommended. If you pick fruit when you're out and about, make sure you thoroughly wash it before you eat it, because you never know what it's been sprayed with. But that's another very fond memory. Nettles. I think any child who's lived in the country in Britain knows nettles. Nettles happen to everybody sooner or later. And the memory here when I was thinking about doing this video is the time when I think I must have been about 9 years old, and I was playing on our garden shed roof, and I fell off into a patch of nettles, and that is something you really don't forget. To this day, you just avoid them. You just do. And of course, because I was growing up on a mixed farm, which was mixed livestock and arable, wheat also was unavoidable. We had wheat out there. Part wheat, part barley, I think, were our crops. But again, there's the lovely, when wheat is ripening and getting ready for harvest, if you're walking anywhere near it, there's a lovely sort of slightly dusty smell to it, a dusty scent, which just says English summer to me. It seems to give off a warmth of its own. Lovely. From when I grew up and all that, there's garden plants as well. Obviously I had a garden when I was a child as well. And one of the garden plants I like most that's included in this deck is Primrose. Those lovely little low clumps of these pale yellow flowers that'll often flower several times a year, but I'm most fond of them here. It's a winter scene, and I'm most fond of them when they flower in winter, because it seems to make the winter slightly less monochrome and slightly more hopeful. Seeing a little outcrop of primroses around the foot of a tree or something. I should say as well at this point, in a lot of these illustrations, Will Worthington has included sort of certain elements of Druidcraft culture, Druidcraft lore, and here he's got a sort of little bubbling cauldron off in the distance there, which is lovely. Another garden plant that's beautiful, very beautiful. And I remember this from, oh gosh, a house I lived in about 15-20 years ago, I think, is Lady's Mantle. Not so much for the flowers, which are pretty ordinary, but for the leaves. And they have this property that they seem to repel water. And so in the morning, if it's rained a little, or if there's been a heavy dew, you'll find a little bead of water in the middle of each leaf, like a little jewel in the middle of the leaf there. And to walk out on a coolish, slightly damp morning and see these sparkling little beads of water is very beautiful, very lovely. Poppies, of course, grow wild, but also cultivated in this country. And I've known them obviously since I was a very small child again, and those beautiful papery thin petals and the vivid colour. But obviously, of course, if you live in a country that, one of the European countries that was involved in the First World War, poppies have a especially poignant meaning attached to that. They'll always mean remembrance of that horrible conflict. Yeah. I think the next few are the ones I call the weeds. Clover. Lovely little plant, clover. Everybody knows clover. It's, usually the three-lobed leaf. The four-lobed leaf is the lucky one, but most of them are three-lobed. And these lovely little pink flower heads, very tightly clustered flower heads, seemed to grow everywhere in the fields when I was a kid. You know, the field would be grass, but then you'd see little clumps of clover scattered all over it. And the same goes for plantain. Plantain seemed to be everywhere when I was a kid. It is just a weed that grows in grass fields with very tough, leathery leaves and these funny spindly flowers that come up out of them. I always regard ivy as a weed. I've had at least 2 houses that I've lived in that I've had to cut all the ivy off because, of course, it's very harmful to brickwork. It can get into your brickwork and sort of start splitting a house apart, which isn't a very good idea. So I tend to be one of those people that chop down ivy. Sorry if you're not, but I am. The last 2 I want to show you are slightly more adult associations, and the borage and mint, which I always associate with garnishes that you put in summer cocktails like gin and tonic in a long glass or Pimm's and lemonade. Add a couple of borage flowers or a couple of mint leaves, and yeah, it just makes it more summery somehow. Yeah, they're lovely and grow out and about. Mint is a terrible weed. You can't stop it once it starts growing. Borage is lovely though. Just a word on some of the quality of the illustrations. Look, I mean, he really is very good at this, Will Worthington. It really is top quality stuff for Madder there and woad. Don't think I've ever seen woad. And that lovely illustration for chamomile. I just noticed the other day, actually, there's a house near where I live now that has a chamomile lawn out the front, and of course it's all in flower at the moment. Very beautiful. And then there's just the rest of the cards, which I'll sort of skip over a bit because we're getting on for time a bit. And that's it. You know, just me rambling about those few cards now really shows you how I use them. I'll just sit and muse over them. And of course, the great thing is that everybody who's ever had anything to do with the British countryside will have their own associations about different plants. You know, somebody will have a fond remembrance of puffball toadstools or mushrooms there. You know, somebody else will have lived in an area where mistletoe grew. It tends to grow on oak trees, I think, mostly. And I used to live in the north of England, primarily, and there tend to be rather fewer oak trees up there, so hardly ever saw wild mistletoe when I was a kid. And so on and so on, and there they all are. All very lovely, beautifully illustrated. It's a lovely deck of cards to play with, and play with them is all I really do, and I'm happy with that. So there we are, just a little ramble for the time being through Philip and Stephanie Carr-Gomm's and Will Worthington's Druid Plant Oracle. Thanks for watching.